Welcome to the second WGP Bike Legends meet of 2016, where the motorcycle heroes of the past featured on their 500cc two-stroke machines as part of the Silverstone Classic in the UK. It's yet another chance to see legends of the sport we all love in action once more out on track, and most importantly, on the legendary bikes they made their names on. And the action takes place this weekend on the hallowed asphalt of Silverstone, the spiritual home of British motorsport and current venue for the British Motorcycle Grand Prix. The 1979 battle between Kenny Roberts and Barry Sheene in particular is one that has gone down in legend, and up to the present day, Silverstone attracts huge crowd numbers, as witnessed to the classic racing action and the WGP Bike Legends this weekend. We're sure you're more than aware what WGP Bike Legends is, this being the third event, but just to get you up to speed if this is your first time. It's a weekend of action, this time out at the Silverstone Classic, and featuring a roster of famous names from the rich history of motorcycle Grand Prix, racing each other on the original 500cc two-stroke machinery from the golden era, with a proper festival atmosphere to boot. The Legends out on show this weekend in Britain. What better way to welcome the Legends to the United Kingdom than with a visit to a local pub? A chance for the stars of WGP Bike Legends to reacquaint themselves with one another, and in time-honoured fashion to perhaps enjoy a bit of liquid refreshment in the meantime. No doubt they'll have been sharing endless stories of races won and lost, and the excitement is that nerves of getting back in the saddle and riding those fearsome two-strokes once more. So, just who are the Legends on show this time out at Silverstone? 1987 500cc world champion Wayne Gardner, an ambassador for WGP Bike Legends. Freddie Spencer, the three-time world champion in 500s and 250s. Grand Prix winner from Belgium, Didier de Radigues. Seven-time world champion across 500cc, 250s and 125s, Phil Reed. Six-time world champion in 350s and 250s, Jim Redmond. France's 250cc world champion, Christian Serrant. Former 500cc racer, Miggy Schmassman. Kiwi Simon Crafar, a Grand Prix winner in the UK in 1998. And former 500cc racer and two-time world Superbike champion, Troy Corser. Our Legends to a man risked everything every weekend. But having raced in an era where safety was often an afterthought, perhaps our most senior legends made the greatest sacrifices. But was it worth it? Jim Redmond, and first of all Phil Reed, revealed the payback from risking their lives and how they coped with the danger of death.
After I nearly won my first Motor Grand Prix at Suzuka in 1963, Jim and I were battling throughout the race, and I managed to get about a 2-second lead on the last lap, and the plug failed. Anyway, I finished third, and I said to Jim and Frank Paris, I said, if Yamaha asked me to contract for next year, how much did I ask? And they went, oh, at least £5,000. So, okay, I was invited back to the factory to meet the managers. They said to me, Reed-san, we'd like you to race our machines next year. How much you want? And I told them, £5,000. And they went, oh, but we only do 5 Grand Prix. So that's £1,000 a Grand Prix. Now £1,000 could have bought a detached house then, you know, in about half an acre. So it was a lot of money, I suppose.
Well, I thought it was brilliant at the time. It came up a little bit, and we started at 3,500 back in '61, and I got it up to 15,000 by '66. And we used to make another 15,000 on the local races, the international races. So I was making about 30, 40,000 a year, which was a lot of money in those days. But unfortunately for me, I didn't get the real money. Phil kept going because he's 10 years younger than me. And so I retired in 66, and the big money started about 68. So I was unfortunate not to get the big cash in.
What did you spend the money on?
Wine, women and song.
A lot of it on wine, women and song, and the rest of it we just wasted on food and petrol in the car and all that.
Obviously we were very relieved to be in one piece after some hard racing, and we go out partying, yeah. Wine, women and song, and this is what it was all about. We'd probably come back and wreck the paddock and steal the flags and banners and right?
And to let the people know how closely we were to get it all going wrong, at the beginning of 62 there were 5 of us that could win the World Championship. Gary Hocking and Mike Hayward on MV, Bob McIntyre, Tom Phillips and myself on Honda. And Gary Hocking said, we're going to kill each other this year. He said, we're 5 guys, we all know how to ride, but none of us know how to lose. And at the end of the year, I was world champion, Mike was runner-up, and the other 3 were dead. So Mike said to me, you know we're on the short list now, don't you? And I said, what do we do, stop? And he said, no, make a will. So it was the swinging 60s. When you're thinking about making your will and you've just lost 3 of your friends in one season, you know, it does, you do know that you are close to being the one, you know.
So obviously we had a lot of relaxing to do in the evening. Excuse me. After surviving some hard races on the track with each other, and yeah, it was a relief to have a few beers and have fun.
As Reed and Redman hung up their leathers, circuits began to get safer as they moved from the roads to the racetracks. However, in turn, the bikes were becoming beasts to handle. Former world champion Christian Saron started racing to conquer childhood fears, and with it, he enjoyed the thrill of a pre-Big Bang 500. They were devils to master, and things often went badly wrong.
Definitely, I feel myself lucky, very lucky and privileged to have been able to live different time of racing, you know, in the 70s, where racing was very, very dangerous, and with old bikes, still fast, you know, with the 750 two-stroke Yamahas, to a change after, and with more professional riders and teams, with Americans as rivals, the best I've seen on track, yes, to definitely change, but especially because the bikes I was riding, the 500, the Screamer, what they call the Screamer, the Japanese Screamer engine, like it was nothing, and then suddenly, wow, all the power arriving brutally. And this is where you journalists started to say, he went high side, you know, that's because when we were crashing from too much gas, it was throwing us up in the air, but that's... So this was a challenge to ride. There was no electronic. The safety was improving on the track and with the equipment, but no electronics, so a real challenge to ride. And the power and the feeling on that bike, I've never ridden anything that gives you that feeling and that, you know, a real challenge. Okay, I've been racing 250, 350, but straight away, the category, the class I preferred was in the 70s was the 750 two-stroke, because they were doing already almost 185, 90 miles at the time, you know, in 76. And then after these big 500, just the 250 I was riding because Yamaha France could only provide me with 250s when I did, but I had not by far the same fun as with 500s. And it was not the same challenge as well, and not the same riding technique. We can't really compare the two. There was no anti-wheelie, So we had to keep the front wheel on the ground. And to keep the front wheel on the ground and accelerate efficiently out of the turn in first, second and third gear, we had to enough power to be able to spin, slide slightly, in my case, some were doing more sideways, but slightly, and spin the wheel to have not too much traction. Otherwise the bike was just going up like this, and then you need to go off gas, you lose too much time in the straight. The nightmare on those bikes were not the corners, it was the straight. Because of that, when we were accelerating, going from, off gas on the brakes and then just idling in the middle, keeping your speed, the two-stroke 500 engine was quite brutal, and it could suddenly go side like that. And then if you were not prepared to control, pushing on your outside foot and lifting your body, almost standing up on the bike, it could easily lose grip suddenly, sideways, also because of the tire of the time, going sideways very much and gripping again, and then throwing you up in the air. And this was the bad thing about it is that it was quite unpredictable.
Riding the treacherously peaky 500s and having high side crashes meant one thing. Many of our legends would regularly race with some form of injury. Wayne Gardner famously took victory in the 1990 Australian Grand Prix with a recently broken wrist, whilst the oft-injured Didier de Radigues was one of the first road racers to try to alleviate the problem of arm pump.
Yeah, it's true. I was one of the first because I was a very, very good friend with André Malherbe, who was from motocross. And when I explained him the problem I had after few laps in the race, when I couldn't use my fingers anymore, and he explained me, you need to have an operation. In motocross, we know that problem. And so they open, and then it's supposed to be much better. Wasn't much better after the operation, but I did it in between two Grand Prix. I was racing for Agostini at that time. I didn't tell him, and I came to Jarama, and he saw I did both, and he saw my arms and said, "What have you done? That's crazy." And I finished fifth the Grand Prix. So, but he was not very happy, Agostini.
Yeah, I had obviously numerous fractures like everybody else in that era. But if you're confident enough to do it and you can deal with the pain, you can push through that envelope, of pain barrier. So I just managed to have the strength of mind to go beyond that. Yeah, in 1990 I fractured my wrist at the Bruno GP, which was...
I remember the high side.
Yeah, it was in qualifying, and I was using a carbon rear brake and it locked up and pitched me over the bar. I fractured my scaphoid bone, and the doctor said, well, it's probably you shouldn't race, and then he said, but if you want to, we can organise something. So I had many injections and some painkillers, and again, dealt with the pain and went out and raced. I finished second with a broken wrist, and then straight after the event, the doctor wanted to put my arm in a cast because it was a fairly badly fractured scaphoid. And I said, well, what are we going to do then for Phillip Island, which is the next race, a week later? And he just said, well, you can't race. And I said, well, I have to, because it's that event's there because of my career. So he said, well, the only thing you can do is we won't put it in a cast, and we'll go out there and we'll deal with it at that time. And before the race, I had a lot of pain, obviously, in practice and qualifying. The bike was good. I knew that I had a potential chance to win, but I thought that I would probably get numb fingers, as what Didier was talking about. And I did. I started the race, had many injections prior to it and painkillers again. But during the race, my fingers started to go to sleep from the swelling in my wrist. And then I was sort of losing Mick, and Mick was leading the race, and I think he got to around a 4 or 5 second lead. And I was going down the straight, holding my fingers, trying to get the feeling back in them. And then some sort of miracle happened. The feeling came back, and I went, well, let's see if I can catch Mick and push hard. It's going to be very painful. So I just had this presence of mind that I was going to deal with the pain after at the end of the race, and I pushed on and caught Mick and went on to win the race. How I did that, I was amazed. Wayne Rainey was shocked. Dr. Costa came on the rostrum and couldn't believe that I could pull that off. And it's one of my greatest victories personally, because of the pain barrier I had to go through and how I had to deal with a broken wrist or broken skateboard.
Who would win the battle of the scars between you then?
Well, I'm sure I win. I'm sure I have everywhere. Collarbones, I break 17 times the collarbones.
17?
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm burned in the back, everywhere. I had 46 fractured bones, 47, one in car races. But, but I did many races injured, and it has always been good races, good results, because maybe I was more focused, and like Wayne said, you know, at Phillip Island, he was very concentrated, and yeah, you still can do it. It's everything is in your mind.
As the 500s developed, GP racing was opened up to some who had chosen the production racing route, including Superbike stars Troy Corser and Simon Crafar. The Kiwi even claimed an unlikely GP win ahead of five-time champ Mick Doohan at Donington Park back in 1998.
By the time I got to ride 500, they were reliable. You know, none of my bikes seized, which is really saying something, because the guys in the eras before me got fired over the bars and, you know, hurt, and it was still dangerous. There are lots of boys off the grid with collarbones and wrists, but normally because they've crashed, you know, not because the bike seized in general. But I think the difference is it was scary going from a good job in World Superbikes. You know, I was the official rider for Kawasaki, and then to turn that down and go and hop on a 500 where I knew it was a big risk. You know, I think Troy will agree with me. It's a risk to take that jump. But I remember being in a gym, cycling away, and I looked up on the wall and I thought, there's Wgbpl, you know, who's 5th, 6th in the World Championship, same as me, but he's in 500, I'm in Superbike, and everyone knows who he is, and no one knows who I am. So I thought, I don't want to be 40 and not know if I can ride these things. They're the ultimate, so I took the plunge.
The biggest difference for me was probably the weight of the bike. Obviously the kilos you feel as a rider underneath you, on acceleration and deceleration, but also in change of direction. The bike was very easy to ride, very light. Power was very short power band, is what we used to call, where a Superbike you have full power range. Probably the carbon fibre brakes was actually the biggest thing for me to get used to after riding steel brakes on Superbike regulation. Yeah, the carbon fibre brakes were a little bit different to get used to, but I was quite fortunate because when I went to the 500s, I was teammate with Catalora, so the bike had been pretty well developed by that stage by him, Rainey, Eddie in the past, so had a lot of good riders to put some input into that bike. So to jump on the YZF, for me it was quite easy. I didn't find it too difficult, apart from the power of the bike and the brakes. But I really enjoyed it. It was nice to have the opportunity to ride one.
I used to look at posters on the wall of some of the guys that I'm here with this weekend, and imagine riding one of those factory bikes and Dad doesn't have to pay, you know, and I didn't realise that when I got there they paid me, you know. So I was so happy to be there, honestly. I think maybe I didn't set my sights high enough. I wanted to ride one of those bikes, and but to beat Mick was a dream come true. But at the same time, it's actually a little bit anticlimax, because as soon as you've done it, it's like, what next, you know? And I don't know how to explain that better, but it's true, you should set your sights higher. So.
As we've heard, through the 80s, the 500s began to be tamed through technological advancement. But it was the likes of 500cc champs Freddie Spencer and Wayne Gardner who were tasked with developing those evil bone crunchers through to the transformative Big Bang 500s of the early 90s, which they both raced. They continued on into the final pre-MotoGP iteration of superbly rider-friendly 500s, which have been at World GP Bike Legends events in the form of the 1999 and 2000 Suzuki RGB 500.
Honda's theory was all the weight down low, and if you remember, Freddie rode the bike, the upside down bike, where it had the fuel tank underneath. So Honda's theory back in the mid 80s was weight as low as possible, like a Formula One car. And it was fantastic on braking, as Freddie will agree, but it was, as soon as it got on power, you just wanted to spin the wheel, because it's a bit like a flat track bike or a speedway bike, where it actually wouldn't squat and get the grip, and wouldn't transverse the weight to the front to get the front grip as well. Very stable on brakes, but certainly, and it also understeered off the corner. It was a terrible, terrible understeer bike. It wasn't until we went through that same theory of Honda's right up until 89, when we actually got a glimpse of the Suzuki, and we've got one here. They had an opposite theory to Honda, where they'd lift the weight, push the engine up like a motocross bike, lift the bike up high so that it transfers the weight forward and transferred the weight back. And since that day, we modified the bike from 89 through to a really fantastic. Honda always had the best engine, but we had to try and get the chassis right. And Honda worked at making the engine rideable, but then we also worked at transferring the weight. And since that day, from 89 onwards, there was a different theory that went through Honda and HRC. And of course now we've got a fantastic and incredible bike. Through the development of the chassis of 89 and 90, we realised that Honda realised that it was very aggressive on rear tyre grip and spinning the wheel, and the tyre life was very short. And top performance in qualifying, always the fastest bikes, and it was quite good to ride. But as soon as you got tyre wear, this thing starts to spin, and then Honda worked out that it depends on the pulse of the engine, on the firing order. So in end of 91, they brought a new theory to this new chassis that we developed, and it was the Big Bang engine. And when I first rode it at Phillip Island, and I was with Mick as well, and we both had one each, and Honda started with the Big Bang, and I said, it feels really slow, there's something wrong with it. I came in and I said, and then they go, yeah, but look at your lap time. And I went, wow, how is that possible? It feels slow. They then studied the impulse of what it does to the tyre, and all of a sudden it was easier to ride, more throttle open, and the rear tyre was lasting a lot longer and more tractable.
Yeah, first time I rode one was actually Wayne's bike. He had retired after the last race here in Kalami, and I went down there with Irv and just wanted to test the bike and see what it was like. And so the first day I got on it, I asked Irv, I said, what do you think? And the only thing he said was that you'll be able to get on the throttle sooner than you think. And that was the first lap out. That is the case. And it was that feeling of tractable power. I was waiting for the thing to start moving, but I was going to get to more throttle position sooner in the corner, and it would hold its line, but it would drive. And that allows
and hold a line.
Yeah, exactly, and hold the line. And that's the thing, is that what that allows is once that real understanding of bike geometry, which came as Wayne was describing in the late 80s, and now you have an engine that we can broaden the power band and make it to where the rider has a wider choice of being able to use the throttle. Then you can really start refining a bike, because you're not bending, everything's starting to work together. And so my first feeling of that bike was incredible.
My last 500 I rode competitively was in 92, and as Freddie has tested as well. And for me, it was my all-time favourite motorcycle to ride then. Just at the end of my career, we got it perfect, But I hadn't ridden a good 500. I've ridden the earlier models in parades and so on, and classic events, but I hadn't ridden anything that's been developed over those years. And this is the last year of the development of the V4s, 500s, and this Suzuki is a Big Bang, and I rode it yesterday, and I was just really amazed what a sweet little bike it is. They've managed to refine, obviously, the chassis to an easy riding, good handling bike that's got a lot of feel, which is very important. But on top of that, the engine's really tractable, because right now this corner, it's just wheelie, it's just like it's in a bit like a 4-stroke, but it's still got nice progressive responsive power. And it just shifts gear and just keeps wheeling. And so It's got an enormous amount of power and it just keeps revving. It's a fantastic broad power band, and it just goes to show you how good that they've developed the engine. It's a pity they don't develop and keep racing these two-strokes, because they are such an exciting bike to ride, primarily because of the throttle response. It's immediate, and with a four-stroke it's never immediate, and that's why whenever we go and ride four-strokes we'd ride them super fast because it seemed easy. And these are much more fun and thrilling, and any current GP rider that gets to ride a 500 and they get off and go, oh my God, that is amazing, you know?
So that's it for another event, and it's been a roaring success yet again, with the British weather for once being kind to all the fans who turned up in their thousands. Some were here at Silverstone to see the array of spectacular classic cars, but no doubt it was the star names from the world of Grand Prix motorcycle racing that really stole the show and brought fans from every corner of the country. The legends signed autographs and posed for photos throughout the weekend and got to share a few classic stories along the way. All in all, it's been yet another successful event for World GP bike legends at Silverstone, and they'll be back in 2017. You're not going to want to miss out on any of the action, so make sure you're there next time.